On April 20th, 1999, America changed forever. That morning, two students walked into Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado, carrying guns, explosives, and a plan to unleash chaos. By the end of the day, 13 people were dead, more than 20 were injured, and the United States had witnessed the deadliest school shooting in its history up to that point. The Columbine High School massacre wasn't just a crime. It was a moment that shattered illusions of safety, altered how schools operate, and left a scar on an entire generation. More than 2 decades later, its impact is still felt. The perpetrators were Eric Harris, 18, and Dylan Klebold, 17. On the surface, they looked like ordinary teenagers. They played video games, went to classes, hung out with friends. But beneath that surface was a storm of anger, resentment, and violent fantasies. Both kept journals where they detailed their hatred of society, their desire to kill, and their obsession with making a mark on the world. Eric, in particular, harbored a deep sense of superiority. He saw himself as smarter than those around him, someone who deserved power and control. Dylan, meanwhile, was more withdrawn and depressed, consumed by thoughts of suicide and despair. Together, their toxic bond created a plan that would devastate their community. In the months leading up to the massacre, Harris and Klebold meticulously prepared. They acquired guns illegally through friends and even modified some of the weapons themselves. They built dozens of pipe bombs, testing them in secluded areas. Their plan was not just to shoot classmates, it was to kill hundreds. Their journals and videotapes, later known as the basement tapes, revealed their vision of destruction. They planned to plant propane bombs in the school cafeteria, set to detonate at lunchtime. The bombs would kill or injure hundreds of students, and as survivors fled, the shooters would pick them off with gunfire. Afterward, they intended to die in the chaos, achieving the notoriety they craved. On the morning of April 20th, the two arrived at Columbine wearing black trench coats to conceal their weapons. Each carried a duffel bag containing a propane bomb, which they placed in the cafeteria before heading back outside. At 11:19 a.m., when the bombs failed to explode, Harris and Klebold began their shooting spree. Their first victims were students eating lunch outside. The killers opened fire without hesitation, striking several students before moving toward the school entrance. Panic erupted as students screamed and scattered, many running into the building for cover. Once inside, the horror escalated. The pair moved through hallways and classrooms, firing at anyone they saw. In the library, the deadliest part of the massacre unfolded. For nearly 7 minutes, Harris and Klebold terrorized dozens of students hiding under tables. They fired randomly, taunted their victims, and killed 10 people in that room alone. Survivors later described the chilling calmness in their voices, the cruel jokes, and the cold detachment with which they decided who would live and who would die. During the attack, the killers showed no consistent pattern. They targeted jocks, they targeted minorities, they mocked those who cried. But they also ignored some students, sometimes pausing to speak to them before moving on. The randomness of their choices added to the terror. No one knew what might spare them or seal their fate. One of the most remembered moments came when a student, Cassie Bernal, was reportedly asked if she believed in God. When she answered yes, she was shot and killed. This story became a symbol of faith under fire. The later investigations suggested the exchange may have been attributed to another student, Valine Schnurr, who survived despite being badly wounded. The massacre continued for nearly 50 minutes. Harris and Klebold roamed the school, firing into classrooms and setting off explosives that mostly failed to detonate. Meanwhile, police and SWAT teams surrounded the building. At the time, law enforcement training emphasized waiting for backup and containing the situation before confronting shooters. That delay proved costly, as students trapped inside bled and hid in terror. Parents gathered outside, frantically searching for answers as news helicopters broadcast the unfolding nightmare live to the entire nation. By 12:08 p.m., Harris and Klebold returned to the library, where they ended their lives with gunshot wounds to the head. Their rampage had left 12 students and 1 teacher dead, with 21 more injured. The killers had fired nearly 200 rounds, and detonated a handful of small bombs. Hundreds of students had been traumatized, forced to hide in closets, bathrooms, and under desks, praying to survive. The aftermath was a scene of devastation. Families waited in agony to learn the fate of their children. Some were reunited in tears of relief, while others faced the crushing reality that their loved ones were gone. The nation watched in shock as images of students fleeing with their hands over their heads dominated the evening news. Vigils were held, prayers were offered, and debates erupted almost immediately. How could this happen? Why would two teenagers commit such an atrocity? The investigation revealed the depth of Harris and Klebold's planning. Their journals showed months of preparation. The basement tapes, which were never released publicly but viewed by investigators and select journalists, revealed the killer's twisted mindset. They spoke casually about their plans, laughed about the destruction they hoped to cause, and fantasized about being remembered as legends. Harris's writings were filled with rage and a desire to dominate, while Klebold's were tinged with sadness and suicidal ideation. Together, their combination of hatred and despair created a deadly storm. In the aftermath, myths quickly spread. Early reports suggested that Harris and Klebold were part of a group called the Trenchcoat Mafia, a clique of outcast students. In reality, the two had only loose associations with that group. Rumors also claimed they were targeting specific groups, athletes, minorities, or Christians, but evidence later showed their rage was indiscriminate. They wanted mass casualties, not just revenge against certain individuals. Columbine had a profound impact on American society. It forced schools across the country to rethink security. Metal detectors, locked doors, surveillance cameras, and emergency drills became more common. Police changed their tactics, adopting active shooter protocols that emphasized immediate engagement rather than waiting. The massacre also sparked intense debates about gun control, mental health, bullying, and the influence of violent media. Some blamed video games and music, particularly the heavy metal artist Marilyn Manson, who became a scapegoat despite no evidence linking his music to the attack. Others pointed to the availability of guns and the failures of the school and community to recognize warning signs. The cultural legacy of Columbine is complex. For some, it became a symbol of the dangers of bullying and alienation. For others, it exposed the flaws in America's gun laws. But for many survivors and families, the massacre is an unhealed wound, a day that cannot be reduced to debates or headlines. Parents lost children. Students lost classmates. Teachers lost their sense of safety in the classroom. One of the most heartbreaking stories was that of teacher Dave Sanders. During the attack, Sanders helped guide students to safety, warning others to stay out of danger. He was shot in the chest while trying to protect those in his care. Trapped inside the school, he bled to death before help could reach him, despite students' desperate attempts to save his life. His bravery remains one of the defining examples of heroism that day. Over the years, survivors have struggled with trauma, grief, and the burden of living through one of the most infamous tragedies in modern history. Some went on to become advocates for gun reform, school safety, and mental health awareness. Others retreated from the public eye, trying to heal privately. For the families of the victims, the pain never fully goes away. They live with the memory of children lost too soon, dreams cut short, lives stolen in a burst of senseless violence. Columbine also left behind disturbing ripple effects. The shooters became twisted antiheroes for a fringe group of admirers who romanticized their actions online. This dark phenomenon has influenced later mass shooters, some of whom cited Harris and Klebold as inspirations. Columbine set a grim template for future attacks, a blueprint that others have tragically tried to replicate. In reflecting on Columbine, it's important to remember that beyond the headlines and myths, this was a story of human loss. 13 innocent lives ended, 12 students, including Rachel Scott, Daniel Rohrbaugh, and Isaiah Shoels, and teacher Dave Sanders. Dozens of others were wounded physically, and countless more scarred emotionally. Behind the statistics are stories of courage, survival, and unimaginable grief. The Columbine High School massacre changed America. It shattered the belief that schools were safe havens. It forced a nation to confront difficult questions about violence, culture, and responsibility. It reshaped law enforcement, education, and public discourse. But most of all, it left behind a legacy of pain for the victims and their families, a reminder of how fragile life can be in the face of hatred and despair. More than 2 decades later, the name Columbine still carries weight. It is a symbol of tragedy, a word synonymous with school shootings. And while the years have brought healing for some, for others, the wounds remain raw. In remembering Columbine, we honor the victims, acknowledge the survivors, and recognize the responsibility to learn from that dark day. Because for those who lived through it, April 20th, 1999 is not just history. It is a day that never truly ended.